All right, welcome everybody. My name is Noah Hausch. I'm the Community Development Director for the city. So I'm just going to kind of kick us off here. Then we have Senior Planner John Paul Harries. You guys might have met him before. He's worked for the city for longer than I have, actually. So you probably have interacted with JP a little bit. And then we have the development team over here. We'll let them introduce themselves. I'll do that now, I guess.
Hi, I'm Heather Wright Foy from Wright Architecture. I'm based in San Rafael, and this is Pat Elton.
Hi, I'm the project manager and land use consultant for the owner.
Great. So really thank everybody for taking the time to come out. We want to be respectful of your time. So I'm just going to get right into it. I just have some kind of high level things I'd like to go over. I'll turn it over to John Paul for a little bit. Then we have a presentation from the development team, and then we just have a lot of time for questions and answers for you guys. There is an agenda up here. It's really brief, doesn't have a lot of detail, so you don't need a copy of it, but just to keep us all on kind of target, we put one of those together. First of all, as I mentioned, just thank you so much for giving us your time tonight, coming out with the weather. But the intent of this meeting is to introduce the project that has been proposed on the Lasker Lane development site. You guys are probably all familiar with the previous project. That project has completely expired and is no longer valid. These folks are representing the new owner. There is a new owner who acquired the property, and they proposed a project with the city. The city has created a process called a neighborhood meeting to early in the development review process, so way before any decisions are made, even before the design is finalized, to engage with the neighbors to allow you to hear about what the developers are considering, and then the developers to hear directly from you what your concerns would be, anything that maybe they could do to address some of those concerns. Obviously, it's easier to do it earlier in the process, and then also to hear from us as city staff about what the process is going to look like and how you guys can best plug in with us to work with us as we move the project along, ultimately to a decision. This project will go before the Planning Commission and City Council, so it'll have two public hearings before any decisions are made. It's important to highlight we are not making any decisions tonight. In fact, I promise you, we will not have every answer to every question you guys are going to have. It's an informational meeting. Again, just to kind of make sure everybody's aware of what's going on, allow the questions to at least be out, shared with us, and us to give you guys the information that we do have now. And then also we have a sign-in sheet. This will be used to create a outreach list. So every step along the way, anybody whose email we have will get a direct email on this, in addition to all the formal mailings that we normally do, et cetera. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Our meeting is scheduled 6 to 7:30, but if we don't get a chance to talk to everybody or hear from everybody, JP and I are happy to have individual meetings with you all. So our business cards are up here. Please take them, email, phone call, whatever's best for you. One of the benefits of being in a small city, you guys can walk in and usually just talk to us most of the time. We really want to hear from everybody. So, we're very comfortable speaking. Some people aren't comfortable at all. We want to make room for everybody. And so if there's somebody who we end up hearing from a lot in this meeting, I may hand you my card and ask to chat with you later. So we make sure we have room for everybody to speak. We also have comment cards up here. So if you don't want to speak at all, but you want to write something down, you can do that. And you can also just send us an email. So just know we're early in the process, as I mentioned, and we are interested in hearing from everybody. Restrooms, if you guys haven't been here before, ladies' restroom is around this way. Men's restroom is around this way. It's kind of a horseshoe building. Again, I just want to really acknowledge a lot of your past participation. I know many of you probably spent a lot of time and effort in the previous Lasker Lane development review process that the city went through to get that project to a decision. And I recognize the frustration that happens when you spend all that time and effort and then those projects don't end up getting built. And so anyway, I just want to acknowledge that because I know there was a lot of time and effort that went into that on everybody's part. And so It's also worth noticing, or at least identifying, that we are under a whole new regime of housing law. So basically, the process that you guys went through and are familiar with from the last Lasker project, a lot of those rules no longer apply. A lot of the mandates from the state that affect the city's review of housing have changed. So just be aware of that. The process will look the same, but frankly, the city's ability to affect certain development projects, especially housing, has really been curtailed by the state. So you guys read the newspapers, you hear the news. The state has been beating the drum of housing since about 2017, and every year they've been changing the laws about housing, really taking away local control and local rights to, frankly, say no to housing projects. A good example of that is the ADU laws. So everybody in here who owns a home is allowed to build two ADUs and a junior ADU on your property. So each of you could essentially turn your home into 4 units. So just know that under state law, that exists for everyone who owns a single family home in California. This project proposes to utilize some of those laws. So just know that that is in effect. The city cannot look at ADU units when it comes to density. It does not factor in looking at how many units are on each lot. Under state law, we only look at the single family home as we are calculating the number of units that are allowed to be built in a certain area of each part of the city. In addition to that, the state has passed a law called density bonus, where we have a density range for each zone. Each part of the city is in a zoning district. Your neighborhood is neighborhood low density, has a density range of 4 to 6 units per acre. Under state density bonus law, developers have a right to bonus that up to 100%. So just know that. And we cannot say no to that. So that is a right that the state has imparted to developers, in addition to numerous other things. But just those are some examples of how the process and the city's ability to influence development has been modified over the last mainly about 5 years. And then lastly, I just want to again remind everybody, we are early in the process. There are no decisions being made. As I mentioned, we might not, are likely to not have answers to every question, but we want to hear from you and we really appreciate your time. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to John Paul Harries, Senior Planner for the city.
Thank you. No, I actually don't have too much to add. I do want to let everyone know that we are recording this tonight. The camera in the back shining this way, so if you're uncomfortable speaking or being on camera, just be aware that that's happening. Like Noah said, we're early in the process. We received the application about a month and a half ago, I'd say now, maybe 2 months. And we conducted what's called a 30-day review. We ask a lot of questions. We consider the application incomplete at this time until we can get our questions answered. I expect that it will be some time, several months, to go through those questions. We also do a series of studies, including traffic studies, biological, cultural analysis, a whole host of different studies to measure what the impact would be from a project like this. Those have not been completed yet. And so, we still don't have, as Noah was saying, we may not have answers to some of these questions, but before we get to hearings, we will have answers to that. As we get information, we will be posting it up to the website. So if you go to cataticity.org, there's a section called Projects in Progress. This project is there. The plan set is there. There also are a few sets of plans in the back that you can help yourself to if you want them. You can always download them from the Projects in Progress, or else I can actually print up a set for you if you so desire. With that, I think I will hand it over. And then once they're done with their presentation, we can go into questions and comments from the audience.
I'll let Pat kick things off.
Well, good evening and thank you all for coming out. We are trying to be the kind of developers that listen. So we really appreciate the ones who sent letters, because we can look at them. We can really incorporate many of those things into the traffic analysis to make sure we're addressing issues of safety, those kind of things. We also try to meet with our neighbors that are most affected adjoining to us. We've been literally walking on this street, and we've had a couple of meetings where the neighbors adjoining actually asked to meet with us, and we spent 3 hours going over the plans. We're willing to do that with anyone who wants more in-depth informal conversations. Because we're about, after it's over, we want to make sure you guys still love each other and barbecue next to each other. And you know what I mean? And that we stay the community that's small but changing, because now I spent 30 years raising children in Sonoma. It changed. I can't afford it. And we checked the demographics here, very similar. The 58 to 64-year-old people, women in general, are housed out of the market because they can't do the mortgages. They can't qualify. So we designed by our architecture is affordable by design. We have come up with a way that an aging parent can have their kids live with them, but not live on them. And, and they could have a renter for a caregiver, and the caregiver can take care of the mother, and people can age in place and be with their grandchildren and have a different environment, kind of an unplugged environment, not the playgrounds, the orchards, picking the fruit, learn how to can it, have some unplugged music in the pavilion, where people can learn how to play the guitar with their grandfather. Our whole point was to teach them how to play chess, kind of get them out of the world of tech and back under the soil and back to some organic ways of thinking. We have a permaculture orchard being planned that sustains the soil, also works to absorb some of the stormwater that came as you all kind of went through. And as we talked to some of the neighbors, we learned some other things, and we'll go into that later in the slide. But I know you're anxious to see what the project means. That's our original intent, was to make sure that intergenerationally people can age in place. And that's, so if you keep that in mind with our goals, I think we can figure out how to solve all the rest. So.
Hi, I'm Heather, the architect. And, while I do have a client who is developing this, well, I come at this from the angle of a person who has a family of different ages that need to be sustained, who's living in a really expensive state. My husband and I both work. We have a 4-year-old. We would love to be able to house my parents. We would love to be able to, be flexible for life. And so when I look at this project, I think what will create something valuable for this community where people can live together with their families and not be working all the time just to be on a hamster wheel. This is about quality of life. It's also, I have a background in working in co-housing. This is not a co-housing community, but it comes with a lot of the principles behind it in mind, where people are facing each other with their front doors. It's not about cars, it's about people. It's about connection. So that's where I come from. Can you change the slide, please? And I'm not a part of a big firm. My sister and I run a firm together. It's 2 of us. So this comes from our hearts. This is an overview of the site. And you'll see 12 single-family residences, each with a junior accessory dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit. These, to be clear, cannot be rented out to 3 separate people from an owner. The owner will need to live there in order to rent it. So there's just a built-in control there of somebody really giving a darn of who they're sharing their space with. We also have a community center building, which is really it's a large gazebo with an interior space for meeting, for eating together, for conversing, for being social. We've also designed this with a Woonerf concept in mind, which is something that the city has adopted. And it's this amazing Dutch concept, which allows emergency vehicles and cars through, but it's more about the pedestrian use. So the cars are the guests in this space. And it allows us to use that street in a way that supports the community and gives more outdoor conversing space to those units. We've also designed the junior accessory dwelling units and the accessory dwelling units to be able to be accessed without stairs. So aging in place is in mind when we designed those. Somebody can access from the front. They're designed a little differently, top and bottom. There's an A model and a B model, just because there is a hill. And so we're responding to that. So that's the general overview. You can change the slide, please. And I'll pass it back to Pat to speak more to our design intent points.
Okay. Well, I don't have it in front of me, so I have to kind of step back over this way if you guys don't mind. All right. So what we wanted is, which I already covered, intergenerational interconnectedness. We want kids to learn from the elders. We don't want just seniors living over here and kids over here in this playground and daycare center. We wanted to create an environment where people can be among their own peers, but they can also interchange with other generations. So that's our intent. Our other intent, affordable by design. When we designed the connecting of two units with the shared wall, was to decrease the cost of building the concrete for building the foundation and allowing those to have rooftop gardens on top so that people can grow their own right on their open terrace above, but they really aren't seeing each other. They're out enjoying their upstairs terrace. The second thing is agriculture and unplugged activities kind of covered, playing a game of chess, learning how to play a game of cards, new ways to just engage with each generation. The Wooners Design Street, which we support, we love that concept, slows it down. We're not about people taking their cars. We're about people being able to amble and walk. We created pedestrian pathways. We created bike path. We created ways that they can park and store their car until they're ready to leave town. But the rest of the time, they have enough to engage in right in their own little community, and they can walk to town and they can go to the bus stop, and we're within a half a mile of a bus stop. Under the new state law, that gives us some other relief to the traffic congestion. We want to encourage, park your car. Try to get involved in things that get you out and about in the community, by bike, by foot, by stroller, to the bus stops, to the train. Try to get into that way of thinking and make your car not so important as engaging with your neighbors. That's our goal. Okay, passing back.
All right. So this slide is speaking to the intergenerational interconnectedness, and specifically, I'll just point to the screen. You'll see, so the Model A units are on the bottom, the Model B units are on the top. They both are accessed from that central street. The main residence is the first portion of it that you'll access for Model A from the front. And the JADU is at the same level as that, on the Woonerf level. And then the ADU is also on that level behind that. JADUs are really quite small, realistically. And in my experience, many single family owners occupy them themselves. That would be an option for these people. And then the garage is tucked below the ADU on Model A. And there's one carport and 2 parking spaces for each unit. That goes for Model B as well. Model B, above, flanking the community building, you access the ADU at the Woonerf level, and then go upstairs to the main residence, which has the JADU behind it, and then the garage behind that. And the intent is that the garages are consolidated. I think we've made them fairly cute for garages, frankly. And we're trying to make every face of this structure be something that's enjoyable to look at. But the community building is a place for people to gather and connect, as well as each individual unit. So speaking to the JADUs and the ADUs, I'm saying that in context of a family living together while maintaining privacy in the same structure. And then the community building is a place for quiet enjoyment. We also have an orchard and planting beds. And that's the area labeled the garden over on the right-hand side. And that's to be, useful and beautiful and a place to learn about the land as a family, as, as humans. Next slide, please. This is the community building floor plan. You'll see that, so roof plan, upper level, which is actually an open space pavilion with a bridge up to the upper fire access road for ease of access. And then the lower level is an enclosed space for meeting with restroom, storage, and then a little space to gather and sit on a hillside and hang out behind. Next slide, please. Unit A. This is each level of Unit A, so you'll see the parking below, ADU, JADU in the primary structure on the main center level, and then the remainder of the main residence on the upper level. Next slide, please. This is Unit B, so you'll see the ADU on the far right. Below, that's access from the Wooner. The primary residence is on the mid-level facing the Wooner, JADU behind it, and then parking behind that. And then the primary residence also accesses the upper level. Next slide, please. So this is affordable by design, which Pat spoke to a little bit. We're trying to embrace the fact that this is a hill. We're not flattening it. We're not creating a ton of retaining walls. We're also literally leaning on ourselves, leaning on each other to support the cost of this. And we've tried to make these units feel like one larger single family residence, so that this isn't a bunch of little houses dropped in from, the sky, that they're really integrated and thoughtful in their massing. And that also saves cost for the ultimate buyer. Next slide, please. This is the planting plan done by permaculture artisans out of Sebastopol. You'll see, and this is in those plan sets and on the website too, so you can actually read it. But there's a large diversity of plants. Damien, who's the landscape designer, is incredible and has created really a little wonderland of things to pick and eat and, learn about too. Next slide, please. So this is the Woonerf concept. Just a few images kind of speaking to that. The Woonerf street in the middle, you'll see the little plaza in front of the community building tying into that, as well as little adventures along the way to create kind of a slow street feel and use. And then these are the elevations on either side of that Woonerf facing inward to create really a homey feeling, like a community feeling. And you can read more about the Woonerf concept on the city's code too. It's awesome. It's a really cool thing. Next slide, please. This is an overall view of the proposal, aerial view as it stands, just for context. We've also taken into account many of the city's design guidelines when designing these, a lot of articulation of the walls, detailing trim to honor the craftsman design style that's prominent here. Next slide, please. Finishes here, we're speaking to, well, fire resistant finishes, number one, just a have to, and a good thing, of course. And the land and the sky, we're trying to make these not beige boxes that, make us all feel like our souls are falling out. This is a place that really speaks to the earth and the sky in terms of its coloring too. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it off to Pat to talk about the zoning.
Okay, so we're in the NL zone, and our zoning allows for 11 houses, and we've requested a bonus unit, only one. That gets us to the 12 lots. We have a 13th lot, but the 13th lot is all the common space to be maintained by the association itself. And we found a way for the association to actually grow things and do stuff in the community right on the property as part of its ways of paying for it. But that, one of the things that we were concerned about in our design for the kind of mortgages people could get. When you have more than one unit, when you're a conventional loan, you have to have 30% down. Even people making $200,000 a year together are not able to come out with the down payment on a sizable amount of property. Currently, your single family dwellings on Honor and on Clothier, 40% or plus, I think it's 44%, are rented out completely. They're not even your name. They're just tenants. 56% are the ones in Katati that are home owned. So when a young family wants to get started, they have to have 30% down of 1.2 million. The way we designed it was to get a multiple mortgage. A multiple mortgage says your income doesn't count. The income from the rents pay the mortgage. So if your family buys it together, the kids can say, we're renting this one out, whether they want to rent it to someone else or they want to purchase their part. Now it's the rents that drive the loan. And that allows you to get it without a high income. And it allows you to go, the Congress is currently working on whether it's going to be a 5% down. They're trying to reduce it to 2% because that's what most people can afford. And that's our purpose, was to give it to the real working families of the community who want to stay where they grew up. My kids had to move. That's just the truth. They can't afford to stay here. I'm trying to design something that allows people to stay.
Next slide, please. So this is just noting we're consistent with the NL zoning and showing the aerial view in context of the other structures in the area. The massing of the structures to the ratio of land space around it is actually quite similar to the existing pattern. And it is worth noting that each of these single-family residences that exists does have the ability, as Noah pointed out, to have two ADUs and a JADU added. The JADU is within existing structure, but an ADU can be an addition and a separate structure. So the reality is that the state law is now supporting added density in this neighborhood. That's just the reality. And so we're actually working with the state law to get that flexibility in use and doing it in a smaller footprint than honestly some of the single family residences around here can now, in order to give nice space to enjoy the land around it. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our preliminary grading and drainage plan, just showing that the contours of the hillside are really remaining as they are to a great extent. I mean, we have minimal grading for what we're trying to achieve here. Next slide, please. This speaks to fencing and privacy facing each side of the lot. The Clothier side, we had pretty extensive conversations with the neighbors on Clothier about creating what? Privacy screening and making them beautiful. And because there's a drop to Clothier, we're proposing to do a staggered fence so that it's not just a big tall thing, but it results in a tall privacy wall staggered into two, with privacy planting and accents to make it nice to look at. So these are just concept drawings and ideas. At this point, we're just starting this conversation. And it shows the Clothier side speaking to screening trees and the privacy screening. And then the Honor side, there are existing redwood trees there. And we've actually flanked Honor with an orchard on the bottom side. And so you get a lot of privacy just built in from that distance and those trees being there. On the upper side of Honor, we're looking at trellises and some accents to break up the mass a little bit, and have had conversations about that. At this point, we are gathering input, you know, honestly, this is a conversation. You have to put something forth to have a conversation, right? Next slide, please. These are studies that we did, a section through the Clothier side properties to look at the height differential. And we utilize LiDAR. This has been slightly updated from our conversation for those of you that were there. Your houses are actually 2 feet lower than we estimated once we got the LiDAR, so we've updated this. But the principles remain, and we're proposing screening trees and a screening fence. And you can see the distance, relative distances there as well. Next slide, please. And that opens it up for questions. Pat, do you want to say anything else before we dive in?
We want your help because this is going to be something the community can look at from the perimeter. You won't see as much on Lasker because Lasker is already there and it's fenced already and the trees are already lining. But Honor is the one we have not had the feedback from yet, and that's why we were encouraged that so many took times to write letters. We understood. We get it. So with that in mind, we want your input on how we can make our neighborly approach. One important thing that they didn't have when they were discussing the previous development where the owner died in the middle of it and it expired by the time they resolved all the land issues and everything that went on with that, it expired. So we did come in and say, can we use the tentative map? It says, sorry, it's already expired and your density has changed. You don't have the same density as you did then. It's gotta be more. So we get it. We did address it. But in our research, we spent a lot of time finding out what has happened on this land in the past. And it wasn't just in 2000. When Lasker Knolls was created, it was, its design was in 1989 and it used a survey that we found on an address that was not our current address. So 45 Lasker was not a part of that. And 45 Lasker was owned by a guy named Lombardi. I guess you guys know all this. And our property was owned by the Moore family from the Weiss family from the Hasselholds, that lineage of chain. So we went back and we spent a year and a half learning the chain of title so that we could find out what has happened on this property. So we uncovered the original Bedford survey of the topography of the original subdivision where we were the remainder lot of that subdivision at that cul-de-sac. So we actually sold everything from in front of our property to Redwood Highway to one guy and retained back the Lasker easement and the Honor public right of way that already existed. When they developed the subdivision, they left that access for the Moore property. The 45 Lasker came up Lasker, but they got access to the Honor side for the 3 little houses that are right there at abutting the cul-de-sac. So in our design, we kept our driveways between Lasker and the 45 Lasker, which we do not own. We only own 65 Lasker. We kept that open so that in the future, whatever the developer wants to do or the homeowner wants to do on 45 Lasker, because that went through probate court and foreclosure court, they can share in the future, they can maybe share our access there to and from their garages. And we minimize the amount of pavement that keeps coming in. Our design here was so that we had internal private roads and Lasker and Honor being the only public roads. With a fire access coming from our parcel of what I call the Moore parcel, parcel 4 of parcel map 33, lot 4 of parcel map 33. We run a fire access easement all the way up to where the fire may come from, which is going to be from the hills and the agriculture on the other side. And okay, that's it.
Got about 30 minutes of this side of the room talking, so I want to open it up for people who are really confused at time again. So we'll let John Paul kind of run. If anybody wants to jump up there with questions, you're going to raise your hand. Perfect.
inclusiveness. I walk around this can everybody hear me? Yep. I don't need that. I know Tim and Sharon, I know Hank, Mary and her grandson Emily, Eve. I know a lot of these people. There's a great community here. And this neighborhood has an identity. What's gonna happen to the identity when in the center of that identity, you have this? Just by my math, you're looking at adding 30, 50 vehicles a day going in and out of the center of this community. That means that we're not walking around. I'm not seeing his grandson, her daughter. I'm not finding out about them because there's too much traffic and it's not working. Okay. On the other part of that, to go to the city planner, I have a National Association of Home Building background. Statistics. September. There are only 620,000 single-family homes built in the nation. That's down 4.5% from last year. There's over 1 million multi-family homes being built right now. That's what those are. Why can't we build 7 single-family homes and keep our identity? Thank you.
It's a great question. Yeah. I got a question. So you have 6 Model A's, 6 Model B's, any ADUs are there? 36.
One per each. No, there are 12 ADUs.
12 ADUs, 24. Well,
But they're all regular. It's only.
they're all one bedroom apartments, 24 one bedroom. So there's 24. Yes. 36. And 12 three bedroom.
You have the main
12 or
residence,
36.
an ADU, just what, 750 square, and then a 400 to 500 square foot JADU. And the garages are underneath or up at the top there where you enter from the top. They're,
One bedroom apartment.
they're one bedroom rentals, yeah.
New York, 400 is,
Mhm.
and so somebody, it's just an apartment. And then you put the 3 bedroom, 2 baths on top, those are bigger apartments. So you have 36 apartments in this 1.7 acres into a community that has 5 homes. The Clothier right next to it has 5 homes, single family, in their 30 years, or 30 plus. Clothier, you want to break a cul-de-sac. Clothier in there, that's why we bought our homes. Exactly. We bought our homes on a cul-de-sac. We raised their son there. It was our bike, his bike. Heard about the traffic? We wouldn't let him out. With these companies. We heard an estimate of 48. My estimate is minimum of 48 acres. That's a minimum. That assumes that 1 bedroom apartments only have 1 car each. You know that's not the case. There's gonna be more. So 48 is minimum. You have 36 parking places, 12 carports, and 24 garages. How many of those do you think are gonna be full of stuff? I guarantee you most of them. Look around, drive on the new neighborhood behind this, the Kessler Ranch. 50% of these, they can't get their cars in their garage, even in our neighborhood. So, I mean, you're adding a huge, it's 36 apartments, more than their people. How many people? 72 minimum, probably gonna be 100.
By design, that's not necessarily true because it's the affordability question. When you have a young married couple, for example,
Yeah,
they,
well,
they would be in the one,
you have a dream.
yeah.
This is a great dream,
Well, it's the state.
but it doesn't fit in our neighborhood.
In 2019, when they passed the Housing Crisis Act and the Housing Accountability Act, they really said all the rules for single-family dwellings are off the table if they prevented you from having an ADU and a JADU on any single-family lot in California. That law came as a result of the larger parcels, the larger single-family dwellings, and no rentals for the people. And of course, Airbnbs weren't a help either. But okay, but thanks.
There's lots of details behind every one of these answers,
Yeah.
but we really want to hear from people who are
Yeah.
here now.
Well,
So,
thank you, though. That was,
Traffic concern, density concerns.
Traffic concern, density concern, parking concern.
and we would like to work with you as we work on the traffic analysis too, because,
Pretty hard.
well, I wouldn't mind it.
White suit right here,
Huh?
the white jacket.
Do you want to say? Right.
Thanks. When you say the city has no control anymore about how many, what's built now, I understand that. But what is the control in terms of the ratio of the density of the build to the infrastructure the city can provide? In other words, the 2-lane highway isn't changing anytime soon. Right? We got a 2-lane highway out there. The more density you build up the hill, even the new development next door, those guys rip through our community as it is, right? It's created a lot of traffic. But what control does the city have to control density relative to the infrastructure this town can provide?
Oh, I don't think that's, so it's basically based on state. Not, so what's called level of service, so that's how well does an intersection function, right? So how long do you have to wait at an intersection to be able to go is the example of level of service. That's no longer factored in the environmental analysis, the state changed that. So to your point, for traffic specifically, it's all about safety, and it's not about my perception of safety, it's about what a traffic engineer deems to be safe.
For daily traffic you're talking about. So what about catastrophic events? And so when we had the fires, for example, we couldn't get out, right?
So evacuation is considered, the fire department will review this, and evacuation will be absolutely part of what is looked at. Circulation routes, and then also emergency vehicle access to the site.
Okay, what about water? Can you address water?
The water, the site has to be able to be served by the city's water capacity and sewer capacity. And there will be a study. We model basically the amount of water and sewer capacity we have, and the demand and supply for that. And it's the results of that going to.
And the impact of water rates, including things like what will happen to water rates, right? The increase in demand.
There is no study on what happens to water rates.
Okay.
It's not as part of any development. That's not a factor that goes. So how water works, generally, the water agency, as a provider of most water in the county, they have a capacity amount that they can provide. There's an aqueduct that comes to Kentucky that serves us. There's a certain amount of capacity in that aqueduct. And then we have wells that we use to supplement the water. We have to look at a lot of things like, what happens if one of the wells goes out? What if the aqueduct breaks? All those emergency preparation things, but rates is driven by the cost of the water. And the amount of infrastructure we have to build to keep serving all the existing customers, not about new connections. New connections is based on the capacity that we happen to be able to buy or pump. And then those people have to buy into the system, but they have one-time connection fee, it's pretty significant, which is how we then make sure we have future capacity. So that's one of the issues you hear people complain about, the impact fees or the cost to build a home. Each new home in Kentucky pays about $70,000 to the city. Portion of that is for sewer, water infrastructure. Traffic infrastructure. Yes, Ray.
That are going in on the other side. Oh, sorry. Yeah, a new group of homes going in on our side of south, yeah, the south side of our group of homes. How does this all work together, or does it?
So I guess they go together in that they have similar zoning. They both have the NL neighborhood low density zoning, which is 4 to 6 units per acre. That one did not take advantage of density bonus. There was a water and sewer study done for that one where we looked at not only the availability of water, but we also look at infrastructure in terms of like pipe sizes and does anything need to be upsized or downsized? In that case, we didn't find any inadequacies in the system. Um, yeah, there was a traffic study done for that project as well, which didn't find, well, what we did end up doing with that one was including a left turn lane. So if you're heading north, you would have a left turn lane into that new street that would go in there. That one was developed with an option, so any home purchase could be, yeah, right. I mean, it's up to the owner, it's up to the buyer in that case, whether they wanted to have an ADU or not, but essentially it allowed for up to as many units. So there are 35 units in that one that could have 35 ADUs sold as a floor plan. They could also come in and install something after the fact too.
This one sounds more like a condominium complex as far as HOA and that type of thing, and the garden and the community center, and who's gonna upkeep all these things? I know you have these great envisions that the grandparents are gonna be walking their grandkids. Kids don't even talk to their grandparents anymore. They're on their phones, or this is like 1970s. It's just really upsetting. It's just changing our whole dynamic of our neighborhood. And it's so upsetting to me. I'm not supposed to get emotional, you told me, but it just, people have paid a premium price to live in this neighborhood. They take care of their neighborhood. We have these great thoughts that we'll have investors in there, they'll buy these places, I'm a realtor and I see these properties and I just see that people just come in and they don't respect things. And that's upsetting to me. We have a neighborhood that's very respectful, like you said. We do walk our neighborhood. We do know all our neighbors. It's a very special place. And this will just change our whole neighborhood. And it's really upsetting. I'm sorry.
Build on it. Your vision is that these will be owned, that there'll have to be an owner. And each one will have an owner, and then all these JDUs or apartments, as I think they're better referred to, are going to be attached to that owner. How are you going to regulate that? Wait. These are just the kind of investment properties that somebody comes in, they buy a duplex, because these are 6 duplexes. They buy a duplex and then they put renters in there. There's no upkeep. They don't care if there's an orchard there. They don't care about that sort of. The Sky Gardens are on the 2nd floor, top of the 2nd floor. What do you think's going to happen up there if these are rented out? Those are going to be extra storage as well as the garages. So how is that? And Carol said, how is that regulated? I don't see how you can do that unless you have a vetting system. Okay, are you going to move your grandkids in? Okay, good. You can. Sure.
We're gonna have an HOA.
We are going to have a homeowners association. We are going to have CCNRs. One of the main warrants that we have been talking about and studying on our own is, one, we have a manager on site and we have an agricultural manager on site as part of the HOA. And the 13th lot that has all those items is what's managed. And also, if a owner rents out to people that become a nuisance or criminal or sound problem, then there is a mechanism that we create a mechanism that holds that owner accountable to their tenants, and there could be immediate removal of that tenant. So it's new in our process, but it's also new to the state. The state has created a lot of new ideas, but they haven't thought about what you're thinking about. And I think it's an important point for all of us to talk about. So we'll love your feedback on that, because I think that we can be a part of it through CCNRs.
And I do have a comment. I think this is really interesting. I like what you're trying to do. My business, I spent 40 years developing geothermal energy. Working for a big oil company, but doing only geothermal. That's all I did. So I'm very interested in this kind of stuff. but this is not the right piece of property to do it on. There are other pieces of property, even in Katati, I know of at least 3 that you could do this and it would be much better suited. This is not the place. Yeah.
So it's a public road on Clothier, Honor and Lasker, and then this is a private road. Is it gonna be much smaller? Is there gonna be parking on the road or are they gonna be allowed to park on the road? And because of what he's talking about with all, there will be a parking issue. Because again, not everybody, there'll be more cars than there is actually garages filling them. So I'm wondering how that'll work, if the whole road will be filled with cars or they're gonna move down to Honor and Lassiger and park their cars as well.
We haven't determined that. We haven't finished how we're gonna, what's going to be public and what's gonna be private. For example, the fire department says that they need a 16-foot clearance for the Woonerf without cars. And if we're at 20 feet, then we can have cars on part of the Woonerf. We have 5 spots that we've currently created with the pavilion so that those are open to the visitors that come. And we are talking about now, we have a fire access road that's going back to the driveways. If that becomes a public road, that's a 10 additional parking spaces on the new public road that's going to be created on Lasker as it goes up our street or not. We haven't got that far in the conversation with circulation. Okay.
Also, I would just add to that, that we are going to be looking at the parking situation. We have, we're somewhat constrained, I hate to say it, but because the state dictates parking in density bonus, but we are going to be looking for opportunities. We recognize, despite what the state says about parking, that there's likely to be a parking impact. And so we are going to be looking to figure out how can we maximize parking in this area. So I just want to make you aware of that. Who is next? Oh, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 members of my family were already scheduled to be out of town, and one of them gave me a note. I'll read her note briefly, and then I'll make my comments. We live at the corner of Dorfman and Lasker, and I'm glad to hear that you've been speaking to people in the neighborhood, but you've never come to our house. We're eager to speak to you about many of our concerns. Right.
Because that's what we want to get every. Because we're affecting each other.
So I look forward to a conversation outside this meeting, but I want to say some things publicly. My 31-year-old daughter wrote that her concerns are increased and potentially congested traffic in our neighborhood, increased noise and air pollution, making our neighborhood less rural, which is the most attractive character and uniqueness affecting our quality of life, and disruptions to wildlife and the microclimate. As I said, we live on the corner of where Lasker becomes a private lane. And if you look at traffic patterns of cars entering the subdivision coming up the public Lasker Road from Old Redwood Highway, 50% of those cars do not stop at the stop sign. They roll right through it. And 95% of the time, there's no one standing where they go, but sometimes there are, because sometimes we don't walk on the sidewalks in this neighborhood. We walk in the street sometimes, and it won't be safe. Now, if we look at Lasker coming down the hill, 45 is now occupied by owners, and I'm really glad that they moved in. We went through a lot of stress with the first proposed subdivision going in at 45 and 65 together. The people who live at 65 are tenants. Most of them don't own vehicles, but people come and visit. The non-residents, when they come down that hill, 50% of the time, they do not stop at the sidewalk at Dorfman. That's the current situation. We're talking about approximately 40 to 50 cars for residents, not counting visitors, between 100 and 150 vehicles coming up and down the road on a daily basis. This is going to create conditions where there is a lack of safety in our neighborhood. Now, before the new subdivision went in on the Honor Court area, I forget the name of this new subdivision. It's right. Reasonably well designed for, you know, the site that they had to deal with. Dorfman ended before that property went in at a fence, a barrier, because the city always intended to connect it through the new subdivision when it eventually went in. That was always the intent. And still the people who lived at the end of Dorfman were very upset, and I don't blame them because they did not want that traffic going through. There's very little traffic coming from the new subdivision into Lasker Knolls. Okay. Some people go out that way because you avoid the left turn problem at Old Redwood Highway. But cutting through a cul-de-sac seems shocking to me. It seems shocking, and I don't know what the state laws are, but to me, it seems a violation of property rights. That you buy a house with an understanding that it was designed to be a certain kind of neighborhood, and now you're violating the character of the neighborhood. So I have a lot of concerns about traffic, congestion, safety, noise, street light, illumination. And because of my particular location, I'm a little bit encouraged by the plans that I saw that there's not a plan to impinge on our historic and existing fence line. We just put in brand new fences on the old fence line at significant cost, would cost a lot these days. And there's a lot of things about this project I like. I think your hearts are in the right place. There's a lot of great design features, and as already been said, this is not where it belongs. There are other places in Cotati where projects like this would be consistent with the character of the neighborhood. This is not consistent with the character of the neighborhood at all. I'm not talking about the design elements in terms of the walls and the fencing and all that. I'm talking about the density and the kind of living environment that you're creating there. It is completely inconsistent with the existing neighborhood. And if it ends up going in because the city can't stop it, at least if it doesn't, you know, cut off more of my property, it looks like it may destroy one of the trees at the front of our property that's been there since before we've been there. We've been there 30 years. So I have a lot of questions. I look forward to a private conversation to try to clarify some of those issues, but I don't think it's safe to put that kind of traffic there. I think you've done a great job in terms of resolving the fire department's concerns with the previous project by creating this Dutch system for circulating so that it doesn't have to be a huge turnaround and so that it's possible for the fire vehicles to get in there. I feel reassured about that. But I think that people who live up on that cul-de-sac up there deserve to have their historic rights protected and their historic safety protected. This violates that. It completely violates that. And I won't feel safe walking along the sidewalk there, crossing Lasker Lane, if this subdivision goes in with the density of cars that you're planning on putting up there. I also share the concerns that have been raised about the character of who's going to live there. All right. And you can't control it.
So I'd like to saw some hands.
Thank you for taking the time to talk through this with us. I know that it's not fun to only hear negativity, but you know, we appreciate what you've done, reaching out to the community, and you know, the vision you have is wonderful. And I don't know how much it would match reality, but I think that there's a lot of positives here. However, you know, what I came down here to talk about was, well, there was a number of things, and I think it's better if I just simplify my message down to like the main important points. my wife and I bought our house on Honor 22 years ago. And that was, that was our forever home that we were buying. And when we bought it, a cul-de-sac was a big selling point for us. We've raised our two boys there. They still live with us. And, I grew up on a cul-de-sac in Novato, and it was really a dream of mine to have that. So, that's the idea of losing that is very disappointing. But on top of that, the thought of the amount of cars that could basically bleed out of the development area and then down onto Honor. So like when we were looking for our home, one of the things that I like to do was go, usually when you go and look at a home, it's during the day, during the week, right? Most people are at work, and you see like, this is a cute neighborhood. This is really nice. But then you come back around 5:30, 6 p.m. and it's just lined with cars. And you're like, that's a different neighborhood. So that's the kind of like forethought that we put into buying our home where we have it. In the last few years, we've put a lot into our home in our backyard because we don't have any intention of leaving anytime soon. But that experience of living on a quiet street like that, living on a cul-de-sac with our neighbors that we all know very well, that we talk to in the streets, and that lifestyle, that's just the biggest concern that I have. And one of the things I wonder about is that, I'm not sure what you call it, but that community part, the gazebo thing. I've seen developments like this, and those structures are a neat idea. But in this day and age and in this area, they end up just being kind of empty. And I don't know a lot of the details of it, so maybe I'm misspeaking here, but it seems like an area that could be more parking rather than just a big empty space that people can sometimes gather, maybe, and talk or throw an event. I don't know. It seems like maybe not the best use of space when the biggest concern that I'm hearing from everybody here is the density of cars.
Hello. Hi, my name is Amir. I live in 45 Lasker. I've had the privilege of moving there. Hello. Yeah. So I had the privilege of moving there 2 years ago with my wife when she was pregnant with our toddler. And we moved here because when I was a kid, my godfather used to live on Clothier, and we loved the neighborhood. It was very welcoming. Everybody seemed extremely nice, and it was just kind of the picture perfect American lifestyle. And so when we moved here, well, no surprise, it was exactly what we experienced. Everybody's extremely friendly. Nobody's ever really cruel. And best part about it is just the freedom to just walk everywhere. However, with these influx of cars, and especially on my little road, there's going to be a lot of parking there. A lot of cars. It's going to be kind of crazy. I can't just send I'd be scared to send my child out there into this, potentially dangerous street now before he went. Right now, he could just kind of go out there and enjoy himself, and we walk down to the park and everything. But with all the cars that would be coming, and the noise and noise pollution, and the light pollution too, it's going to be extremely, it's going to be a completely different environment. It's not going to be something I was looking forward to kind of growing my forever home in. My family's, we're just starting out. We just started, we have a 2-year-old now, right? But this is kind of like it's just a completely different shift from what we originally envisioned our future. And I know it's not always about us, but it's the kind of like the community here moving in, large amount of, as this gentleman over here stated, that there could be 50 more people living there. And that's just that amount of density. It's just, there's a higher chance of crime, a lot more traffic. Accidents will happen. It happens because people are just crazy drivers, as this other gentleman over here said. People blow through that stop sign a lot. I see it happen. I might have done it once or twice myself too. But but I always make sure, it's safe. There's never really a lot of people there, but it's just a completely different environment, and it's just something I don't think I'd want to have my child be raised in.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I live at 8617 Lasker, and I'm at my forever home too. I'm a pretty simple person. But when I saw the letter and I saw that, it's kind of like, well, just how do you plan to put all that in there? So, okay, well, it's one lot. Okay, how many structures? You have all these walkways and a community center. Just how do you plan to fit that in there? Without there being some sort of impact on people. I mean, the people in the cul-de-sacs, punching through this street, punching through that street, all the traffic. People don't stop at my stop sign either. So yeah, just how do you plan to fit all that into that little spot? It just doesn't seem very practical. And people are not going to use their garages. They use their garages for storage. Nobody uses their garages. And yeah. Yeah, Sharon. All right. Yeah. So you guys, okay, I saw the letter. And it said, okay, we're gonna have this many buildings here and this many lots, this, and I said, whoa, it's too dense. Yeah, yeah. It's just how do you plan to cram all that in there, right in the center, of a small little neighborhood? This area is residential low density. Yeah. So it's like, okay, at least scale it back by a lot, yeah, simple person. Just how do you plan to put all that there?
Do you want a response or was that rhetorical? What? Do you want a response or was that a rhetorical?
So there's like that were happening. I've been watching all over the state, what's happening. I've been trying to follow the trends to see what communities, how they're responding. Because the idea is to have families live together. COVID changed a lot of people when they got into their house. We've had to have offices at home. I think even your census statistics have changed on working from home than they were in 2020 prior to COVID. And now things are taking on a new dynamic. We're trying to respond to them as quickly as the legislature is putting it on us. I changed our plans 3 or 4 times based on the laws as they change. We're not trying to influence the law. We're just watching what's happening and trying to get to know each town and the trends. And in your town, you have higher density in the NL zone. We are consistent with the general plan. And on NL.
20 minutes left, so I want to make sure that wants to speak Jackson. So JD back here and then these two.
Hi, I'm Haven. I live on 98 Jaglaw. We're the new kids in town, my husband and I and our 2 boys. And in our family, at one point, we had 4 cars. At the time, we actually only had 3 drivers. Now we have 4 drivers and 3 cars. We just made that decision. But I think what's really interesting is that as much as you can, extrapolate studies from like a bigger picture of the state of California or the Sonoma County or the city of Cotati in general, if you just look at Kessing Ranch as a good example of a recent development, I think that you have to look at some of the statistics that came out of that development. Definitely the cars per household. I was talking to a realtor who sells new build, and she confirmed with me kind of my perception, which is a perception because I have not studied this with 100 different samples. But it's that most families have 3 to 4 cars. So truly the single family homes, the 12 of them that are here, just the single family home alone is going to have 3 to 4 cars. And then you have the ADU and the junior ADU. And so the questions that I think we should be asking you is this a viable project if you only built 10 single family homes? Is it a viable project if you reduce the number of ADUs or junior ADUs? I don't know what's a better benefit. I don't know if it's better to have a single family home with a junior ADU. That way it is more possible that it'll have less cars, or if it's better to have single-family homes with ADUs, which are bigger, which therefore could be a family of 3 living in a junior ADU. And I mean, in an ADU, and I really do believe a family of 3 would live in a 700 square foot home, because most of my clients that come from San Francisco have been living in 700 square feet. And when they have that baby is when about the time they start coming to Sonoma County. So, and my other, in looking at those statistics, the other thing I've observed about living in my new neighborhood, which I absolutely love, and you guys have completely embraced us, so thank you, is that there were, and Bruno, 3 boys, not just 2, is that there were the option to have 3 ADU homes that could build ADUs, and only 1 person purchased a home and chose to build that ADU, and you are correct, it was for their adult child. So that's wonderful. As I walk around our 42 houses at Kessing Ranch, I also notice, again, an observation, that maybe there's about 10% of the families that are multi-generational, meaning that they have children, which I think needs to be deemed at 25 or older, living in their home, not at 18, for obvious reasons. Many of them are still in college. And then, that my concern is, what is the timeline for selling this specific of a lifestyle and this specific of a home? How long will it take to sell them? Because what I always tell my clients is, you've got this big bullseye when you're buying a home or selling a home. And based on what your target market is, that target of finding the buyer gets smaller or bigger depending on what your property has to offer. And then same with the buyer, right? Whatever you're buying, whatever your willingness is to, change or navigate your desires is going to make your bullseye bigger or smaller. So I just really think that, like, Kessing Ranch is a really good example. Like, know the statistics of what really came out of that development. And 100% the car thing is a huge issue. I just called the city. Yeah, I don't mind telling you it was me. I just called the city because somebody was parked in front of our fire hydrant. And I'm a big safety person too. I will not make a fuss about something that's not safety. They were parked in front of every single one of our stop signs and in front of the fire hydrant, all at the same time. Because when does that happen? When people want to gather and they have extra cars. The time of day was not an issue. And so the other issue about the parking and the use of the additional roads is that, we have an HOA in Kessing Ranch. HOAs cost money over time. And one of the biggest things I've had to say to my HOA peoples is, we don't want to do too many more projects in our development, because one of the things that pushed us out of Marin, and we did also come from Marin, is that our HOAs went up and up and up. And in fact, we got out of our townhome in Marin just in time, because within a year, our HOA dues would have, I'm not there anymore, would have gone up $200 in a year in Marin County. And so that is another reason why, you kind of have to look at the flow of who's moving here. Not somebody looking for a smaller place to live, I can guarantee you. So that's my last thought.
Hi, I'm Sharon Morgan. I live on Dorfman, about midway in the older development, so about midway on Dorfman. I think everything has been said about traffic concerns, so I won't go into that because I share those concerns. And also density, and I'm thinking, why not more infill and renovation in downtown Cotati? So that's something that was in the back of my mind. And I want to say that I love your idealism. I love your vision. I just, as many others, wonder about the density in that particular spot. And I want to clarify by studying more the traffic flow and the plan and all of that. And a question is, I wonder if you know about Frog Song, which is a co-housing community, and it's been there quite a while. And I know some people who live there, so I, heard anecdotally comments throughout the years, and I know they have a beautiful community room and kitchen. And of course they have the edible landscaping and all of that. But I'm wondering
over time, if you have a sense of how people feel about that community, do they feel like it's a real community in the emotional sense? Yeah.
The landscape designer lives at Frog Song, and he's really drank the Kool-Aid in a good way.
But those are co-housing. So I mean, they're really tied together. So
They're-
that is a community.
One other question, damn. Forgot it, went right out. Okay. Again, I like your idealistic approach, and before coming to this meeting, I wondered, how realistic is that? Just because of economic concerns, yeah, it's great to have this intergenerational pod, but if you only have one, I don't want to say one person, but say, the residents of the main property, and they're the mortgage holders, and maybe they're supporting an elder parent or they're supporting a college student. You're not going to have multiple payers in that mortgage. So those are some real concerns. And as a parent and a grandparent and daughter of, elderly parents who passed on, I'm gone through all those life stages. So those are real concerns.
My name is Lynn, and we just bought the house. We haven't even moved in yet. The corner of Honor Place. We're down at the bottom of the cul-de-sac. I don't even know what our cross street is yet. Hi. Hi. Yeah. Oh, hi.
I'm watching your first.
Hopefully we'll be moving in within the next week and a half. But the reason we moved to Cotati was because we wanted a rural lifestyle. We moved from Irvine, California, which is near the University UCI, and it's a very planned community. And that is what we liked about this. It's a beautiful, seemingly planned community. But we did move here because it was rural, and we love that the population is only 7,000 people are in that neighborhood. And my concern is the price point of these homes, and is this going to change the demographic of our neighborhood? And that's kind of a concern. And of course, I have the concerns of what everyone had to say here earlier about the traffic. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I would be really, really disappointed if that moved in, and we would have possibly maybe not put an offer on that house and bought that house if we had known that that was going to be up our street. Thank you.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes. I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance. So right here. Right behind you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'll try and keep it quick. So I know I'm just echoing basically what everybody's said, but talking about parking again, so perfect example is our place where we had just up until recently when my sister-in-law and her fiance had moved out, 5 adults living in our house plus grandmother, so 6 at one point. And that was 5 cars for all of us to get to work. And that's in the garage, 5 bicycles and our camping gear and our grandma's slides. And so our garage is full and all 5 of those cars are overflowing from the driveway and into the street. So I'm pretty sure that, like people have said, those small garages and things are going to be full of holiday decor and, memory books and all that stuff that we acquire in our garage. And there's just not going to be enough parking. And we're already, experiencing that in our own household. So just talking again about lots and lots of parking for all of these cars that there's going to be.
I just have a quick question about where is the fire road? The exit, you mentioned a fire road.
Oh, so just for any new development, fire department project gets reviewed by multiple departments: planning, building, public works, and fire. So the fire department will review the project for conformance with the fire code. And there's a lot of rules about entry points, exit points, circulation, all of that. So again, the project's still being designed, so it hasn't been defined yet. But I guarantee the fire department will appreciate 2 access points.
by Honor's book. I have, I know.
One second. Bill?
At the very end, I want to address something to you and your people. This is a quick question too. There is an existing structure in that area. Is that going to be demolished or, okay, thank you. That's.
I just want to say, take a look at Frog Song, because it's a really happy community, but it's not as dense as what you're doing, I'm pretty sure. But, you know, that, they all work together because it is a co-op, but it's individual housing with a community center. And it's a very positive place in Cotati, but it's right downtown too. It's not in the middle of a housing project. So, anyway, you might look at that as a comparison to, because that's something that kind of fits our, community.
Anybody else?
You don't have to follow it. One question is more for local government. This can't be the first time that people have come into a situation like this. So what are the short-term and long-term tax? What happens to the property taxes for people who live next to something like this in the long term and in the short term? Are you guys going to propose something like that, put that information out? Do you have that already?
No, that's not information that we have.
Will you have it in the future, be able to give it?
The county assessor might be able to do a better job of answering that question. Yeah.
The long term and short term, what is the, and this is not something you can answer now, but what kind of planning is the city doing for downtown? We just keep building, but there's not much happening in downtown, right? There's a lot more traffic, right? Which this won't help. But a larger question to the city is, like, for example, you put a hotel and you're putting a hotel in, what did that do for all of us? It's not, you know, a motel or a hotel doesn't service the community. A grocery store would have, but I imagine there's an Oliver's issue there, but but it's that's one of the things that you can just see getting worse and worse. Sure, traffic gets worse, you keep building, you can't control the density, but downtown has got to change to service the kind of density you're putting into this town, and it doesn't look like it's happening.
That's a giant discussion. So your point is well received. So one of the main concerns we have as the city, just, I'm gonna take some of your meeting time, I'm sorry, but, so the city basically boiled down, we are a service provider, right? The toilet needs to flush, your tap needs to work, police need to show up, fire department needs to show up, we need to inspect your new construction, right? We provide services. Property tax do not cover the cost to provide that service. Flat out, does not cover the cost. We are always looking for ways to cover that cost for service that we provide. Sales tax is the way that we're looking to do that. And my city manager, one of his main concern is us becoming purely a venture community where people just live here, utilize all the services, and there's no revenue being driven by commercial activity. You all have to leave town to go to work. You all have to leave town to go shopping, and there's no opportunities for anything but that. That's what we do. Exactly. And we're doing everything we can to try to balance that. Right now, all the state cares about is housing. I promise you, you look at the list of laws that they passed, they're 100% focused on housing. Nobody goes shopping anymore. People order on their phone, and Amazon is how we buy majority of our stuff. We've all heard of the retail apocalypse, all those types of things. We're struggling with ideas and ways to try to support the business community. You don't start businesses. The city is not a developer. All that land is privately owned by people who may want to build something on it, may not, may currently be using it as a business, may have future plans. And the things that we're doing are making every effort we can to incentivize people to, as they're building housing, which is something that banks will lend on, people will buy, people will rent, so it's a guaranteed business return on their investment. They also are providing some commercial uses. So we have restaurants, we have stores, we have all this stuff. It is a challenging thing for every city, let alone one that's prided itself on staying small and not developing with the town next door that did everything they could. I mean, it is a challenging situation.
getting communities involved in those discussions?
Oh, absolutely, we can. I'm happy to have conversations. The city, the biggest effort that the city did was the downtown specific plan that was adopted in 2009. Wrote the plan for that. Coming out of the recession, it's been challenging to implement it. We're doing some things that we bought the property at 120 East Kentucky Avenue across from the city hall or across the park. We are partnering with somebody to build affordable housing there that will include some commercial on the ground floor. We're redoing the plans around the train station, trying to take advantage of people being able to come in and out of town through that, so we don't have to drive as much. We're really trying to motivate people to get some commercial as a part of that. But in the meantime, the state is saying, build housing and you can do it almost without any approvals from us. So there's a lot of struggles that we're having with commercial development. Talk about quite a bit. But today I don't want to waste these folks' time who came out for this, but just know it's absolutely something that the city's focused on and being thoughtful about. And we do look to the hotel as being a catalyst to try to support getting some other business activity going downtown, getting some other activities, some other events, those types of things that bring people into town, spending their money, going to our businesses, even if they don't live. But just absolutely something that's very critical. But really quick, Dennis, and invite.
I just have one really quick question, and I'm not sure if this is for the city or the developer, but has there been an environmental impact report done on the impact on CTS, the California tiger salamander? Because I know they're really big population in our area. I see them on my property all the time. I'm always moving them and taking care of them. And I know they're endangered or at least threatened, so that.
So the California tiger salamander is an endangered species. It's a federally listed endangered species. And this property is actually within that critical habitat zone. And it comes right up to Hunter's Ridge, that habitat zone. As a part of this, there will need to be a biological analysis of the property and determine the level of impact to the salamander. If there is an impact to the salamander, you can get what's called a take permit, which means you have to go and protect other property that is being set aside for preservation of salamander in order to develop on this property. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. Most of the west side of Cotati, I would say, is, if not all of the west side of Cotati, is in the critical habitat for the California tiger salamander. Sure.
So I know you were talking about doing a traffic study, but I am thinking about all of the new housing units that are going in south of East Cotati Avenue, both this and the one to the south of us, and the impact on heading through downtown Cotati, getting through the stop signs, getting to 101. People, I mean, it's, if anybody else is with me on this, it's kind of a nightmare. And that's before these two new housing units or projects have even started, let alone gotten completed. So hopefully somebody's looking at this. I don't know.
Guys are looking at that new subdivision south or south of Clover.
Every project of any size gets a traffic study and it's cumulative, so it takes into consideration, other developments that haven't.
How far out does it go? Does it go all the way to 101?
It all depends on the individual characteristics of each project. And like the way the traffic flows.
Okay, I'm going to take one more and then we'll let Greg make a statement.
Might be able to do two. Mine's really quick. Neil Ramos, 8612 Lasker. What's your ideal price point that you're aiming for these? Market, I know. What's your target at this point with your 36 units? $800 plus 4. So you're talking about 1.2 per unit per major unit.
I mean, that's the value of those
redesign. So we're not even.
That idealism is going away.
We'll be talking to builders about how it's going to be done, and we will produce as many costs as we can to, the way we designed this was to make it happen like a single family home, but house the people that are going to be doing your single family homes are having 5 people in it. This is happening. And so to address even the COVID game that happened, where families were separated because they had an emergency worker and couldn't even have to come home, started a lot of these conversations. We are a long ways away. All communities are a long ways away from how they're going to address what they just read.
Well,
But we
7:30.
are also trying to address it that can be organized, thought through, put our own CCNRs against ourselves, and set up a community that long-term could stay and stay a long time.
Thanks, Pat.
I want to be very much thankful for everyone's time, respectful, concise. Sheldon has a statement he wants to make to us.
Yeah.
You guys can stay for that, and then me and JP will stay here, wrapping it up a little bit.
It's a statement in question, you know. What does the city what kind of role does the city have to advocate for people who have lived, you know, this is a 30+ year, we've owned our house 30 years this month, incidentally. We live at 8417 Honor, directly across. We are going to be looking at your garbage bin. Look at your plan. You've got a garbage bin. We're going to be looking directly at that. But going back, so that I ask about the advocate, because one thing that this does, it always gets me looking and seeing, you know, what's the city say and whatnot. And maybe you even wrote this, no, I don't know, as a part of the community development. City strives to provide residents with housing opportunities while still maintaining a high quality of life by facilitating appropriate, and should have underlined, appropriate, new housing development and maintaining the existing housing stock. You've heard a lot here. I haven't heard anyone say this is appropriate. So you have a lot of uphill to go. You know, that's just it. And I hope, we've seen in the past, you know, there has been, they wanted to break the cul-de-sac 20 years ago. And Dennis got up and gave a very similar, I don't know if you had kids yet. Got up and gave a very similar. Next meeting we had, somebody had gone up to visit it. I know you were there a week ago, JP. That's designed as a cul-de-sac. We had every right to believe it would be. So I think we're out of the appropriate underline. So,
Question about advocate, our job is not to be an advocate.
yeah.
Our job is to be a neutral third party. Everyone in this room has a vested interest in what happens in that project, except JP and I. We don't even live in Kentucky. Just to be frank, right? So our job, I mean, for better or worse, people can have all kinds of opinions about that, but our job is to be the neutral person in the middle.
Okay,
Recommending to the decision makers, here's all the points of the law, here's all the points of the project, here's all the points we've heard from the community, and we put all that in our report.
It's amazing to me that we don't have any advocates then in the city. I mean, wouldn't you think? You know, we pay property tax for all these, I don't get it.
Well, you have elected representatives for you. Our job is to be the neutral.
Do you mean the councilman?
Yes, yeah, that's supposed to be council.
Yeah, well, we have to pray. I know that some of. This is why I wrote an 8-page letter.
Yeah,
Because I'm trying to, you have to put numbers. You know, Carol and I talked about, we try not to be emotional. We want to put what the actual impact is. No, what the actual impact, and the impact is huge. I actually really appreciate that. That you wrote it down.
You guys are coming. Make sure you sign it in.
JP.
Can
you make sure that these two get my letter? The letter
They did.